Hosting the GCC summit in the Kingdom of Bahrain is a demonstration of His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa's commitment to supporting joint Arab action and strengthening it. The steadfast position of the Kingdom of Bahrain, led by His Majesty the King, and with the support and follow-up of His Royal Highness Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa, the Crown Prince and Prime Minister, underscores its diplomatic role and endeavours to maintain regional security, cooperation and consolidate its strategic partnership with key ally countries. To talk more about that, we are pleased to be joined here at the studio by Mr. Rida Abdullah Faraj, Shura Council member and Deputy Head of the Economic and Financial Affairs Committee at the Shura Council. Dr. Rida, thank you for joining us here at the studio.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope we can sort of throw some light on what GCC has sort of as a role to play, both locally within the Gulf and internationally, and that is something which we are all proud of today, that this relatively young organization has a real very important and vital role in the sort of really life in general, and the sort of their existence in the scene, the economic scene, is very, very sort of obvious, and just as an indication that the growth rate in the GCC countries is much higher than any other country, and we could be the highest in the world, with the exception of one or two countries who could be higher than us. The inflation rate, which is a very indicative of really the efforts of the leaders, how they could manage the inflation, which affects the life of the citizens and residents in the countries, is much lower than the world really average inflation rate. We are about, I think, 1.9 or even less than that, and the world is much higher than that. Not only that, the forecasts, and these are not ours, these are sort of the international institutions in the world, the forecast puts GCC countries growth over the coming 5 years way ahead of all other world countries. The countries who have been sort of really, they are developed and they have their economies settled and their structures in place. We are still young sort of economies, and we still sort of really have a lot to do, but our growth is much higher than the growth of most of the countries, and there are very few, I think one or two, who could be better than us. The growth indicates that sort of really the GCC countries, definitely the leaders who do the strategic planning, the forward thinking, putting the resources together, making sure that the resources are available for what is needed, are actively not looking for the sort of the prosperity of the nations or the people or citizens now, but is for the generations to come, by establishing really the right channels for the revenues, rather than depending purely on the oil, which we have been doing over past many years. And some of the years, some of the countries of the GCC, they could have sort of been around 90 or even more of their total revenue coming from one source. Today, if you look at the sort of really economies of the GCC, they're all diversified. They're all sort of trying sort of really to say oil is a resource, we would have it, we would use it, but however we need to diversify, go into other sort of channels of revenues generating. For example, in Bahrain, the country which we are sort of definitely more very active, but we are the smallest as an economy among the GCC countries. We have diversified. I mean, if you look at the figures 5 years ago and how dependent we were on the oil as compared to the total revenue to today, we would say about 70-80% of our income had to come from oil to finance the whole sort of really activities of the government. Now today we are saying is less than 50%, much less than 50%. The rest is coming from other sources, many other sources. Definitely still we have to do a lot more, and the government is having plans to do a lot more, but the period is not that long to have dependence on one source shifted to other sources which are really more sustainable. Taking oil is one of the products which is coming from under the ground and is not going to be there forever. One day it's going to sort of really finish. But the other sources of revenue which the government is sort of really have created and are pursuing and is still planning to create more, are more sustainable, diversified, gives better sort of opportunity of expanding it rather than one source which was the oil. So therefore I think the GCC countries, they have over the number of years they have been in existence, not only looked at prosperity for their own countries, they have been very active on the world scene in helping, in contributing. And one of the things which I would like, and I always tell people, that the GCC countries have never been selfish. They have not looked at their interest at the expense of the others, because there had been opportunities where they could have insisted on their own interest and had harmed the others, but they never did this. They always had the two sides in mind, the citizens, the residents of the GCC, as well as the people of the world in total. Say, for example, in controlling the oil supply, I mean, they watch it carefully to see that there is never a shortage of the oil in the market, and there is never oversupply of the oil in the market, because if there is oversupply, there are people who would get harmed. If it is undersupplied, also there are people who get harmed. Although if it is under, sort of really the demand is more than the supply, we could stick to that, because that pushes the prices up, and that's our benefit. But we never did this. I mean, not the GCC never did this. I think this is something which sort of really a lot of people do not see, besides sort of really helping the other nations by giving them soft loans, by giving them subsidies, by providing them with the other resources for making their life of their people much better than what it is.
Yes, and I believe, reiterating on what you said, this is not a decision of one country. This is a decision of the GCC countries united in taking this role in the region. And I believe this summit, the 46th GCC summit, comes at a crucial time. As you said, the GCC always extends a hand to the neighboring countries. So how do you see the importance of this summit being hosted here in Bahrain today in light of the challenges
I think
in the region?
An excellent question, because this is really a moment where we see a lot of things happening, and happening, some of it may haphazardly in some areas. GCC have been sort of really, I'm sorry to use the word, but maybe not the right word, but as a tranquilizer, cooling down, making sort of really a contribution which relaxes the tension and the sort of really the wrong activities, let us say, which harms people of the world as a whole. So there have been sort of really, this sort of summit has come at a very, very right moment, when the world is in need of really a wise, a more relaxed, a more sort of really, we are all in it together. We are not alone, although we may be in a better position financially and economically, but we do not take that and ignore you and say, no, we are all together in it. So the role of GCC is sort of so important that a lot of countries depend on what GCC is going to offer, is what is the next move from the GCC. not only on the political scenes or the unrest which is seen in parts of the world, but even economically. I mean, there are sort of really disasters or catastrophes all over the world recently. The floods in the sort of Far East, for example, is one of the things. GCC's contribution and GCC's availability and willingness to be the first or among the first to go and help is looked at as being one of the sort of really issues which relaxes the tension, helps people who are in distress, and guides people into what they could do in the future for themselves. I think it has come at a moment which we all, not for ourselves, we also need, as a GCC countries all together, to look at what is next. We have done a lot, but there are a lot more to be done. So that what is next to come, this is the right moment for us to sit and think collectively how we could handle the needs of our people, citizens really, and residents also. I always keep the residents in mind, that to live a real
Dr.
respectable
Rida, I have
life.
to interrupt you. Sorry, I have
Please.
to interrupt you. Their Majesties and Highnesses, the leaders of the GCC countries, continue to arrive along with the accompanying delegations at the invitation of His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa. His Highness Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Presidential Affairs of the United Arab Emirates, is arriving now to the kingdom to lead the United Arab Emirates delegation to the 46th Gulf Cooperation Council Summit that is currently being held in the Kingdom of Bahrain. His Highness Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Presidential Affairs of the United Arab Emirates, is arriving now to the Kingdom of Bahrain to lead the United Arab Emirates delegation to the 46th Gulf Cooperation Council Summit that is currently being held in the Kingdom of Bahrain. He is received by a personal representative of the King of Bahrain and the President of the Supreme Council for Environment, His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Hamad Al Khalifa. His Highness Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed is accompanied by an official delegation that includes a number of officials from the UAE's government. The Kingdom of Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates enjoy long-standing relations strengthened further thanks to the directives of His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa and His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, UAE President. The two countries' ties are based on deep-rooted fundamentals and visions, which is evident in the distinguished relations between their leaderships throughout history, in addition to their close cooperation within the Gulf Cooperation Council, as well as at the Arab and Islamic levels. Welcome back. Our coverage of the 46th GCC Summit continues, and we have our guest here, His Excellency Shura Council Member, Mr. Rida Abdullah Faraj. Back to you, Mr. Rida. You were talking about the role of the GCC plays in the region, which is not only looking at its own interest, but also the interest of neighboring countries and Arab countries. On top of the agenda of the GCC summit for this time is the Sudanese profile and also Yemen. What can you tell us about these?
Well, I really would not like to indulge in the sort of political side too much. I think our role is vital because we have no interest as such in the countries other than being our brothers who need help. So our discussions would be always to find a solution which would put the people of the countries at war, if we call it war, or at sort of really
unrest,
whatever sort of terminology is used, is to put them where they have some sort of security and stability to continue with their life and build their countries, and with doing whatever sort of really we advise them to do. If they follow our advice, I don't know, I think it would always be accompanied by a lot of financial supports that we would do help you if you sort of settle your problems and there is a security with rebuilding whatever it is and finding sort of opportunities for people to find work or sort of providing you with the food for whatever. I think it's always we advise, we look at their interest and make sure that they have the sort of really the security and stability in their countries to work. Coupled with that, we always offer financial assistance and financial support, and that is not something we sort of really give it with sort of really we gave you. We never say we gave you. We give it as if a father giving to his son or brother is giving to brother. Never we keep talking about it. We never say we did this. We always say it's our duty to help you. Mm-hmm. That is one of the features of our sort of really or characteristics of our relationship, not only with our brothers and sort of other Arab countries, but even with sort of other foreign countries. We do the same. We never say we did. We do quietly. We hope we do it quietly and discreetly, not to sort of humiliate anybody that they are receiving help and assistance. I just pray to God that sort of really they do follow our advice, whatever advice we would give, and that they sort of really look into their countries and see that sort of really the only thing which would sort of really help them to prosper and grow is if they have security and stability. So therefore let us sort of really all hope that our advice, or the GCC advice, whatever it is, it would be sort of really be taken as if sort of really it is something given brotherly way and with no really strict something is sort of really holding it or pulling it or pushing it. No, it's freely given, and hopefully they would take it.
Right. Also on top of the agenda of the GCC summit in this session will be the Palestinian cause. So what's your take on this?
I think again, I mean, sort of our sort of really attitude toward Palestinians have been always they are our brothers. We love them. We wish them to have a very secure, stable life within a state which is sort of really Palestinian state, and with all the prosperity which goes with having that state. Also, there is a lot of other political issues surrounding it which has to be taken into consideration. And today you cannot say that I love this and I have it. No, I love it. I would like to have it, but there are other forces surrounding it or affecting that sort of thing has to be taken into consideration. We, in the past, we used to work in isolation as if there is nothing else, no other forces affecting. We have to get it. Now we have realized over the last sort of couple of years that we have to look at the thing, we have to see what is best for us, but not ignoring the forces which has effect and impact on what we are trying to get. So the two things have to go side by side, and this is the beauty of the GCC. I mean, I see in their sort of foreign policies that they have been very wise, that they have taken both sides in. They have never ignored that Palestinians, they have the right, they have to exist, they have to live, they have to have a comfortable life and all that sort of thing. But there are forces also surrounding that issue which has to be taken into consideration, and they have been taking that into consideration. That's why we have achieved now the state which at least there is no killing going on, and hopefully the next steps would follow, which would be all sort of really with the aim and objective that the Palestinians would have a state which is stable, secured, and they can start building their life the way we all expect them to have.
Right. Economic integration is as well one of the topics on top of the agenda of this summit. If you can shed light on the economic aspect of integration between the GCC countries, the current projects they're working at, and the future projects to come.
I think sort of really nobody can ignore that the sort of cooperation, coordination, the help between the GCC countries, it's an obvious, and we in Bahrain in particular have felt it and experienced it and lived it much more than anybody else. And I think that has been in many ways coming in with packages at the time of the COVID. We had sort of lot of sort of issues, so they were the brothers who extended their hands and sort of really, and they were so generous, and we have to be very, very grateful, and we would continue being grateful to what they did for us and they were doing for us. We hope in the future that there would be more sort of similar cooperation, but maybe directed at other issues. I hope sort of really one of the things that the GCC becomes one labor market, and therefore, I mean, we have no problem with employment. There is no unemployment. GCC has no unemployment and would never have unemployment in the foreseeable future. I don't know what happens in 20 years, 30 years from today. Nobody can predict, but we don't have. But we need to act as one market. GCC can, labor can move from one market to the other. This is what I hope the sort of leaders in this summit would really have their final issue or final say in it, and organize it in such a way that we all benefit. There are a lot of projects which are sort of really essential to this part of the world. Countries individually, maybe Saudi Arabia and other countries can do it, but I think we need to get collectively together and say these projects, we do it collectively. We have a share based on our size and our capabilities. The others have bigger shares, yes, but projects which can sort of really be sustainable, projects which can grow in future, projects which would employ the sort of GCC nationals in it, projects which sort of really not only meet the needs of GCC but also can export to the other countries in the area. The third sort of area I feel sort of really is the connectivity. This sort of really, now we have started luckily between Bahrain and the Emirates, UAE, and that's excellent, is one point of entry. I think this should be really sort of
implemented
spread
across
among
the
all the
GCC.
GCC countries. So therefore, we are one sort of we are citizen of one sort of group, and we can move freely from one country to the other. Definitely, there are. I'm not sort of really against having certain formalities all sorted out before. We have to sort out the formalities. The formalities, once it is sorted out, then that free movement should be there. That's another issue which I think is sort of, hopefully I expect the summit would consider and be there. The other sort of issues are really all related to having this sort of the economies of the countries more sort of really considered as not one product based, is more diversified. So let us look at what diversification. I'm very much for twinning. We can twin with Saudi Arabia, for example, in many areas. The simplest one would be the tourism. The eastern province is that close to us that we can sort of really twin with Saudi Arabia on the tourism. The tourists come to Bahrain, they could go also to the Saudi Arabia and sort of spend some time in Saudi Arabia. Tourists in Saudi Arabia, they can come to Bahrain, spend a few days, and that sort of really needs some sort of arrangements whereby the movement is made easier than going through all the formalities which currently is there. So there are several sort of really let me call it projects, yes, which the summit would be considering, which I think is all directed towards making life for us citizens of the GCC better, healthier, happier, all that sort of thing. And I think they have done something in the past in the things which I have in mind or I mentioned, and I think now it is really to build on those and expand it and make it bigger rather than restrict it to what it was.
Right. So we're moving from a phase of cooperation, Gulf cooperation, to economic integration or strategic economic integration.
I think you said it very well. I think this is it. I mean, the cooperation has always been there even before the GCC. I know, yes, I can say this proudly. I think now is the time for integration. We should integrate. There is nothing that me and somebody, my brother in Saudi Arabia, we cannot be the same. Yani.
Yes.
We come here, I go there. So the integration is truly the next phase of our relationship, yes, between the GCC countries.
And we have seen integration when it comes to customs union.
Yes.
It has succeeded. It succeeded in easing the flow of goods between, exactly, all the countries of the GCC, exactly, enhancing the economies, exactly, of the GCC.
Exactly, and there was sort of a lot of other projects which sort of really many years back they started a common purchase. Why we should sort of medicine, for example, yes, why we are buying ourselves, Saudi Arabia buys on their own, UAE buy, they buy on their own, Kuwait on their own, Oman. Why not sort of be a central sort of warehouse, depot, whatever we call it, in a place, and we have a common sort of really one purchase order to serve all the GCC countries, and that slowly moving into starting producing part of medical equipment, medicine itself, and for the GCC rather than for Bahrain, UAE for the UAE, no, it's for the whole GCC. So the integration is really the vital thing we should be aiming at from now onward. Yeah.
Right. And speaking about the legislative side of it, how do you see the cooperation between the legislative branches of the different GCC states?
I think there are certain legislations which could have something unique to this part or that part. Currently there is cooperation, but it is not a really what they call a documented type of cooperation. Say, for example, in Bahrain, whenever we have a sort of either a recommendation for a law, or we have a project of a law, or there is a law which is being sort of for the Amiri decree, we always, prior to having the law in the form which can be said as a law, whether it's a recommendation or as a project or it is a decree, Normally there is a lot of consultation, at least this I can tell you from our side, lot of consultation
with the GCC
with the
states.
other GCC countries to make sure that we don't come up with something which is in conflict with what they have. It's normally in harmony. All the laws we have been introducing is after consultation, ensuring that there is harmony in the laws of the two countries, and it is not harmful in any way to any of the other GCC countries. And it is needed. Maybe some of the countries, their need is not as urgent as ours, or ours as urgent as theirs, but it is needed, and eventually they would be taking. So every time we look at a law, we say what Saudi is doing, what Emirates have, what Kuwait have, what Oman, what Qatar have. So therefore we take all the GCC countries, what they have, and make sure that our laws are in harmony with what they have. So therefore to have one set of laws is very good, but maybe it's a bit early. We need sort of really to have some of the laws which are unique. Say for example, we have sort of, let us say, that's what is going on, employment. Employment laws. Certain sort of really laws are typical for Bahrain because it deals with an issue which is typical in Bahrain only. It may not be the same in UAE or Oman or elsewhere. But I think the laws are in harmony and should remain in harmony. And I think if anything one could say is that there could be something from GCC to say, please make your laws, but try to consult each other, or have the sort of really consultation before the law is issued is something mandatory, even if they want to do.
Right. And what's your view on joint institutions? We have successful stories of joint institutions between the GCC countries, say for example the Federation of GCC Chambers. How do you view institutions?
I think this is something which can be done with no sort of really need for even sort of really the leaders wasting their time to do it. I mean, they have been blessing this, or I know that this have been blessed by all the GCC leaders. I think this is for the private sector and the other people, interested people, to take the initiative and try to get these sort of things really sorted out between the institutions here and there. I mean, we could sort of really look at issues related to the Borsa, for example. You can look at issues related to other sort of really associations or institutes which deals with the professional side. Why not sort of really the accountants, for example, they talk to their sort of counterparts in Saudi Arabia and in sort of UAE and the rest of the GCC countries, and form their sort of accountants sort of cooperation, whatever they like to call it, a joint sort of understanding where sort of they can set the rules for accountants or even lawyers, doctors, all those sort of really professions. They can get together and establish something which is a GCC set of rules and regulations, because the doctor practicing in Bahrain is no different than the doctor practicing in UAE. So therefore they could have a common code of conduct or whatever sort of really you call it, ethics, whatever, for the GCC to work on.
Right. Speaking about the importance of this summit and the timing of this summit, how do you reflect on the attendance of the Prime Minister of Italy to the summit, Giorgia Meloni?
Well, this is again one of the things which I always sort of really advocate, that we are, GCC is friendly to, as a part of this word, to the extent that we can. We are not sort of really saying that we would do this and the other which we cannot. We do things which we are capable of performing and doing. So therefore we are open, anybody come and see, and inviting sort of really the Prime Minister of Italy is one of the things, that we are part of the word, we work in harmony with the word, and we care for the word as anybody else, and care for our people also at the same time.
Right. This is the 46th GCC summit. Bahrain itself has hosted 7 summits before, and this is the 8th one hosted by Bahrain. How different is this summit from the previous ones?
I think, to me, all the summits are excellent, whether it's held in Bahrain or outside Bahrain. The fact that you get the leaders to sit under one roof and think about common problems or issues, it in itself is an excellent, undoubtedly. This summit comes at a time the world as a whole is going through a really bad phase, according to me. We in GCC have certain issues which we need to think about it as one unit rather than each one having an independent view. For example, you mentioned about Sudan and sort of Yemen, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, all these people, each one of them having some issues which may be relevant to sort of people or not, but it is, I think, relevant to in the political sense. So to meet and have a common view and say, we think that these people should do this. We're not thinking people to do this for our sake only. We are looking at them as our brothers. We would like them to have a secured country where they could sort of really build their countries better under a secured sort of situation. That's, I think, why this summit is important. There are certain issues which requires common, collective approach and view and stand, which I hope we would get from this summit, inshallah.
Right. The summit has always had the aspirations of the people at the heart of it. When it comes to the outcomes of the summit, it has always had the people's aspirations at this summit.
I think sort of really, I may sort of really have something to say. I mean, I think one of the things I would say about GCC is that their, publicity.
Yes, we're expecting images of the summit's beginning, but let's carry on for now.
Yeah, I think I always sort of really have the same thing in my mind, that sort of really we have to create awareness among the people. If anything, I think this is a bit lacking. I don't mean awareness of the publicity in terms of meeting, they met at the airport. That's all sort of really part of the formalities, and that's very good. I think respect is very important. I need creating awareness that this summit has got these problems, these issues which have sort of really been affecting or would affect or whatever it is, create the people to understand.
I will have to interrupt you once again, Mr. Rida. And now we can see images of Sakhir Palace, where the 46th GCC summit is set to begin, chaired by the Kingdom of Bahrain. For over more than 4 decades, the GCC has gained extensive experience in economic development and security coordination, making it an effective framework for addressing regional and international developments. Bahrain's hosting of this session reflects the Kingdom's role in strengthening constructive consultation and expanding avenues of cooperation among GCC states. Their Majesties and Highnesses, the leaders and representatives of the GCC countries are arriving to Sakhir Palace along with the accompanying delegations at the invitation of His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, as the Gulf leaders will discuss the mechanisms of joint Gulf action in such vital summit and extraordinary event. Back to you, Mr. Rida. The cooperation between Bahrain's Shura Council and the GCC Shura Council, where can we take it further?
Well, I think sort of really currently there is sort of really what we call it give and take between the two, but maybe it's not that frequent as it should be. I think I would like to see more of delegations from the Shura Council, from the GCC countries coming to see the experience of Bahrain. I think the experience of Bahrain is really rich and worth really being sort of really shown to the others. Likewise, Bahraini Shura members in the parliament also, they need to see what others are doing and how they are doing it. I think to the extent of working together and knowing what each other are doing, we understand that, but more in-depth relation of individuals knowing each other, me picking up the phone or Mr. X picking up the phone, talking to his counterpart on the other side, that is not there at this moment of time. And I think that is something which we could do a bit more. We could also look at sort of really the methodologies we use in really maintaining the records is one thing which really is really the property of the future generations. We have to look after it, make it clearly sort of really visible for them how the sort of process of legislation or creating a legislation sort of really was going through what issues. That's one thing which we could sort of really sit together and have that available to be shared between all the sort of Shura councils in the GCC countries. And there are other sort of really projects of really more related to having an understanding of what other sort of really part of the world having in terms of issues which they are considering and how they are dealing with it, and have a common sort of understanding. And in case of future legislations, we could have something which is really we take the needs of all the GCC countries into consideration.
But Bahrain has always believed that democracy and development are pillars to prosperity. How do you reflect on that?
Well, this is very true, and we think sort of really, and we believe, and we are practicing, and it has been practiced, that democracy is a pillar, is a very vital and important sort of part of your existence. So your security is there, and this democracy is part of your security, part of your existence, part of your sustainability or the future sort of existence. And the good part of the sort of democracy, we may not agree all on one issue, and we may debate or differ. However, that in itself enriches
Mr.
the
Rida,
idea.
I have to interrupt you now. Their Majesties and Highnesses, the leaders and representatives of the GCC countries are arriving to Sakhir Palace along with the accompanying delegations at the invitation of His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, as the Gulf leaders will discuss the mechanisms of joint Gulf action in such vital summit and extraordinary event.
تفضل.
pivotal summit, an extraordinary event. And now we go back to our guest, Rida Faraj. Mr. Rida, what is the importance for Bahrain to share its success stories when it comes to its democratic process with other countries, especially countries in the region?
Well, I think sort of really the things which we can share, that democracy is an instrument to the prosperity and doesn't hinder the prosperity, subject to the sort of really country itself knowing how to handle certain critical issues before it gets to the climax. This is the whole sort of really role of the leaders. The sort of really democracy itself is a very, very sort of important tool for prosperity, for sustainability, for the security itself. But you need to be careful handling the situation before it reaches the climax, where sort of it becomes out of control. The second issue related to the democracy is that sort of really is a process which takes long time and is not something which you could say turn it overnight. Yesterday I was undemocratic, today I'm a democratic person. No, it's a process, and it's a process of education, creating awareness, and it's slow and ongoing process. It never stops. So therefore you have to have really that patience to deal with this situation as you go along. The third sort of really thing is that we always have in life generally that certain hurdles which may not be hurdles, but people see it hurdles. It is the wise man who would sort of really quietly, coolly explains that this hurdle is there. Okay, it's there, you say it's there, but we can handle it together. So therefore you have to always have the formula of, if there is a problem, we too are responsible for that problem, and we too have to control it and solve it together.
Yes.
That's what we have been doing so far in Bahrain with regard to the democracy, in a very brief, yeah.
Right, it's part of the maturity of the process of the democratic process, I believe. Now, Mr. Rida Faraj, I thank you so much for joining us here at the studio, marking this occasion.
Thank you very much for having me. I think sort of really all sort of really zeal and enthusiasm, then sort of really we would see the outcome of this summit, something which is we have been all waiting for, and I'm sure we would see by the end of this summit all the sort of resolutions which are really what we expect to see, and hope to translate them into a reality and work with it in our daily life. Thank you very much for having me.
Right, thank you.